He wasn't supposed to be found, a half-blind Army veteran, broken by war and silence. And the dog before him? A German shepherd labeled too dangerous to live. But when their eyes met, the world went still. Not fear, not training. Something ancient, a bond that time couldn't kill. One man forgotten, one dog condemned. And yet, in that frozen Denver morning, Grace walked back into the room. If you believe second chances are divine, not random, type amen, share this story, and stay. Because what happens next will touch your soul. Please support us by subscribing to the channel. The winter air over Denver hung heavy with silence, brittle and bright beneath a washed-out sky. Frost glazed the streets like spilled glass, and the faint hum of morning traffic was the only sound that dared to move. Beyond the city's bustle, at the edge of an industrial district, sat the Denver Canine Rehabilitation Facility, a place where damaged service dogs were given one last chance, or more often, one last night. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered over metal kennels lined with frost. A low growl echoed from the farthest cage, deep and raw, vibrating through the concrete floor. His name, painted on a dented plate, read, Rook. He was 6 years old, a German shepherd bred for war, muscles coiled under a coat of sable and black. One ear stood rigid, the other bent from an old wound. His muzzle bore a scar that ran across the bridge of his nose like a knife mark left by memory. He did not bark without purpose. When he did, it sounded less like sound and more like a verdict. Officer Dana Crowley, the youngest handler in the unit, walked down the corridor with her clipboard tucked under one arm. 28, tall and lean, her auburn hair tied into a strict bun, her green eyes carried the fatigue of someone who'd seen more endings than beginnings. Before joining the K-9 unit, she had served briefly as a volunteer medic with the Army Reserve. 2 tours, 1 heartbreak, and a lingering guilt she never spoke of. She stopped at Rook's kennel. He stared back, unflinching. His amber eyes were neither hostile nor pleading, just watchful, as if measuring her intentions. "Morning, soldier," she murmured, "still not eating." The dog's only answer was silence. Behind her, Captain Mitch Rosner, a thick-built man in his 50s with weathered skin and hair gone silver, entered with a folder under his arm. His presence filled the hallway like authority itself, quiet but immovable. 3 incidents, Crowley, he said. 3 bites. We can't keep him. Dana turned. "He's not aggressive. He's terrified. Someone broke him, sir." Rosner sighed. "You can't fix every scar you find. Behavioral rehab's failed. Headquarters wants a final report by tomorrow. We're putting in the euthanization request." Her jaw tightened. Permission to try one more evaluation. "Crowley," he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose, "this dog has ended careers. He doesn't respond to food, to tone, to any command. You step in that cage again, and you'll end up in the hospital next to the last guy." Dana hesitated, then quietly, "There's someone I want to bring in." Rosner frowned. "Another trainer?" "Not exactly." That afternoon, a man arrived at the facility gate. He was tall, broad-shouldered, beneath a tan Carhartt work jacket dulled by years of wear. His jeans were faded, boots scuffed. His beard was trimmed, but uneven, and streaks of silver ran through his dark hair. His left eye, milky from damage, turned slightly away from the light. He walked with a slow, deliberate gait, guided by the faint tap of a white cane. Ethan Ward, 35, U.S. Army veteran, discharged after an IED explosion near Fallujah. Once a handler in combat search and rescue, now half blind and half forgotten. The kind of man who carried his ghosts in silence. Dana met him at the gate. "You came," she said, her voice equal parts relief and uncertainty. "You said there was a dog Ethan replied simply, and that it mattered. She led him through the narrow halls to the southern kennels, the smell of disinfectant mixed with the sharp tang of cold metal. "He's different," Dana said quietly. "He doesn't trust anyone. But the way he looks at people, it's like he remembers something that no one else does." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Remembers what?" She hesitated. "War." When they reached Rook's cage, the air shifted. The shepherd was already standing, alert, muscles tense beneath his coat. Dana started to speak, but Ethan lifted a hand gently, motioning for silence. He stopped 3 feet from the bars. For a moment neither man nor animal moved. The world outside, the fluorescent buzz, the distant traffic, faded into nothing. Ethan tilted his head slightly, sensing the dog's breath, the rhythm of it. "Name's Ethan," he said softly, voice rough but calm. "U.S. Army. I've seen your kind before. Hard places, long nights." Rook didn't snarl, didn't move. His ears flicked once, then froze. "I know what it's like," Ethan continued, "when the ones who trained you leave you behind." The shepherd took a slow step forward, pressing his nose through the bars until it brushed the back of Ethan's gloved hand. Dana's eyes widened. "He's never—" Ethan raised a finger. "Shh." The dog exhaled sharply, then sat. Not because he was ordered, but because something ancient in him recognized the tone, the cadence, the man. Rosner watched from the doorway, silent for once. Ethan turned slightly toward Dana. "You said he was condemned?" She nodded. "Then maybe he just needed someone who remembers what that feels like." For the first time, Dana saw something shift in Ethan's expression, a faint, weary smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Give me a week," he said. Rosner crossed his arms. "You get 3 days. If he bites, it's on you." Ethan nodded once. "Deal." As Dana led him back toward the front office, she asked quietly, "Why did you agree to this? You didn't even ask what kind of dog he was." Ethan shrugged. "Because you said he mattered." That night, snow began to fall again, soft and soundless, layering the city in white. In the kennel, Rook lay awake, amber eyes fixed on the door through which the man had walked out. His ears twitched at every whisper of wind, every shift of the distant footsteps that faded into the hall. And for the first time in months, he didn't growl, he waited. 3 days after that first encounter, the Denver sky turned to steel. Snow drifted thick over the rehabilitation yard, coating everything in silence. The facility's exterior lights hummed under a shroud of frost as Dana Crowley waited by the training field, breath rising in pale clouds. She'd argued, begged, and finally won. Ethan Ward had been cleared for a temporary volunteer permit under psychological rehabilitation supervision. Officially, it was paperwork. Unofficially, it was hope. The gate opened, and Ethan stepped in, bundled against the cold in his tan Carhartt jacket and navy flannel shirt. He looked steadier now, more grounded. The scar at his temple caught the light like a pale thread of ice. Behind him, Captain Rosner and 2 handlers watched with folded arms, ready to intervene at the first wrong move. Inside the chain-link enclosure, Rook waited. The German shepherd stood motionless, posture alert but not hostile. His breath formed mist around his muzzle, and his amber eyes locked onto Ethan the moment he entered. The connection was wordless but immediate, like 2 magnets finding alignment after years apart. "Morning, soldier," Ethan said softly. No commands, no whistles, just tone. The kind a handler uses when the world is ending and calm is the only weapon left. Rook tilted his head, ears twitching. His tail didn't wag, but the stiffness in his shoulders eased ever so slightly. Dana stepped closer to Rosner. "Watch this," she whispered. Ethan crouched slowly, resting one knee in the snow. "Easy now," he murmured. We've both been through the same kind of storm." Rook took 2 steps forward, then another. When his muzzle brushed Ethan's gloved hand, the veteran exhaled a shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That's it," he said, voice low. "We don't forget the sound of each other, do we?" The dog's ears flicked forward. He sat uncommanded, eyes fixed on Ethan's face. Rosner's mouth tightened, but even he couldn't deny what he saw. "You've got 3 more sessions," he said gruffly. "Make them count." By the 3rd session, the connection had deepened. Ethan spent hours in the observation room afterward, recording notes. Dana watched him between tasks, curious. He spoke little, but there was a precision to his words, a soldier's discipline wrapped around a man who'd seen too much. When she finally asked about his sight, he didn't flinch. "Explosion," he said. "IED outside Fallujah. Shrapnel tore through the optic nerve in my left eye. They said I was lucky." "Lucky?" she echoed. He smiled faintly. "It means I got to keep seeing the things I can't forget." She hesitated, then, "Do you remember anything about dogs before this?" That question hung in the air like breath in cold wind. "I remember sand," he said finally, "wind, and something barking in the smoke. But when I try to see the face—" He pressed a hand against his temple, grimacing. "It's like static in my head. They told me it was trauma-induced amnesia, but the scars behind my ear, those weren't from the blast." Dana frowned. "What do you mean?" "They said it was a medical procedure, sedation and memory stabilization." He gave a bitter laugh. "I didn't realize stabilization meant erasure." For the first time, she saw real anger in him, not loud or reckless, but a quiet, burning defiance. That evening, while cleaning the supply closet, Dana found a small cardboard box labeled Archive, Reassigned Canine Files. Inside were faded collars, tags, and flash drives. She flipped through them idly until one tag caught her eye, a dull metal disc with the engraving Rs K17 2419-89, Tactical Unit. Its leather strap was worn through and the clasp half rusted. Dana turned it over and froze. Along the edge of the tag was a faint line of etching, almost invisible under grime. E.W. Her pulse quickened. Ethan Ward. When she showed it to Ethan the next day, he turned it over in his hands like something sacred. His thumb traced the letters, slow and deliberate. The moment his skin touched the metal, he went still. Something flickered behind his eyes. An image, half seen, half felt. Heat, smoke, a collapsing wall. Somewhere in that chaos a dog barked, a desperate hoarse sound swallowed by explosions, then a scream, a child's. Ethan jerked back, dropping the tag. "I saw," he murmured, breathing hard, "a convoy, sand, a boy crying." "Ethan," Dana said, steadying him. "What boy?" He shook his head, the memory already unraveling. "I don't know. It's gone. Like it never wanted to stay." Rook, lying nearby, had lifted his head at the sound of Ethan's voice. He stood, padded forward, and pressed his nose to Ethan's knee. The contact broke the tremor in his hands. "Maybe," Dana whispered, "the dog remembers what they made you forget." Ethan looked at her, the faintest tremor in his smile. "Then I guess I'll have to learn from him." By the end of the week, the snowstorm that had locked the city finally broke. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, spilling gold across the kennels. Rook followed Ethan's voice with uncanny precision now, responding to tone and rhythm alone. That morning, Rosner signed an official note, "Behavioral progress satisfactory." But when he handed the clipboard to Dana, he muttered, "Don't make me regret this, Crowley. That dog's got history none of us understand." Dana looked at Ethan and Rook through the glass. The veteran knelt beside the shepherd, hand resting on his shoulder. For once, The animal looked at peace. "I think," she said softly, "that history just found its way home." Snow kept falling over Denver that week, a relentless curtain of white that softened the city's noise into a dull hum. Inside the canine center, heaters clicked weakly against the cold. Ethan Ward was in the training bay again, his calm voice echoing off the walls, while Rook followed each tone like it was a compass pointing home. Dana Crowley stood in the observation room, coffee untouched, watching through the glass. Something about the way Ethan moved, the patience, the steady hand gestures, the rhythm of command, felt too natural to be newly learned. It was muscle memory. It was something older. When Rook responded to his voice in perfect timing, Rosner muttered from behind her, "That's not training, that's recognition." She didn't answer. But when Ethan ended the session, Dana followed him to the break room, where the old coffee machine hissed like it shared his exhaustion. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He looked up, one brow raised. "You just did." "I mean seriously," she pressed, smiling faintly despite herself. "When you speak to him, it's like you already know his language." Ethan's jaw flexed. "Some things you don't learn. They come back." That night, after everyone left, Dana stayed behind. She couldn't shake the question. How could a dog trained for military operations end up here, with records missing and tags etched with the initials EW? In the dim archive room, she booted up the oldest computer in the department, one still connected to the pre-merger K9 network. Lines of file names blinked to life, half in English, half in coded abbreviations. Her fingers typed the number from Rook's tag, RZK17-241989. Only one document appeared. Operation Winter Halo, classified, access restricted, handler EW. Her heart skipped. The file had been wiped, but fragments remained. Timestamps, GPS coordinates, near Aleppo, Syria, and an attached line in faded gray font. Status, handler MIA. K9 extracted, condition unstable, MIA, missing in action. Dana whispered, EW, Ethan Ward. She copied the remnants onto a drive, her pulse pounding. She didn't realize Rosner had stepped into the doorway until he spoke. "You shouldn't be digging there." Dana turned, startled. "Sir, you know about this file?" Rosner's expression was unreadable. Winter Halo was shut down years ago. Whatever's in there, it's above both our pay grades. Was Ethan part of it? "Crowley," he said quietly, "some things are buried because digging them up costs lives." The next day, Ethan arrived late. His face looked pale, jaw clenched, like someone who hadn't slept. Dana noticed the tremor in his hands as he removed his gloves. "You all right?" she asked. "Nightmares," he muttered. "Sand, smoke, and a word I don't understand." "What word?" He frowned. "Horzu keeps echoing in my head." Dana blinked. "That's German." He looked up, sharply. "You sure?" "Yeah, it means sit down." Something flickered behind Ethan's eyes, realization, disbelief, fear. He turned toward the training bay where Rook waited behind the mesh gate. "That can't be coincidence." "Try it," Dana said softly. He took a breath, stepped into the enclosure. Rook stood still, tail low, muscles tense. Ethan's voice was low but firm. "Horzu!" Instantly, the shepherd dropped into a perfect sit, eyes locked on him. Dana's breath caught. "He's responding to your old commands." Ethan stared at the dog, his chest rising fast. "He remembers, even if I don't." Rook tilted his head, as if waiting for the next order. Ethan's hand shook. He didn't give another. When he stepped back out, his expression had changed. Something inside him had shifted from confusion to something sharper, purpose, or maybe dread. Later that afternoon, they sat in the staff lounge, heater buzzing faintly. Dana set the flash drive on the table. "I found something you need to see," she said. Ethan hesitated, then plugged it in. The screen glowed pale blue, displaying the broken fragments of the Winter Halo file. Coordinates, mission tags, a redacted handler report, and a final log note: extraction incomplete, civilian casualties, containment protocol enacted. He stared at the words until they blurred. "I was there," he whispered. "I remember a child crying. Rook wouldn't leave. Neither would I." "You were trying to save them," Dana said. He nodded slowly. But someone didn't want them saved. Outside, the wind slammed against the glass, shaking the window pane. It sounded like faraway artillery. Dana leaned closer. "You think they erased your memory to hide what happened?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he unzipped the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a worn medical tag, metal edges bent, letters half faded. He placed it on the table beside the flash drive. Etched faintly beneath his name were the letters: MS, Neurological Stabilization Program. Dana read it aloud. "They did something to your brain." Ethan nodded. "They called it trauma therapy, but I woke up 3 months later with no mission logs, no handler record, and a scar behind my ear that doesn't belong to a medic's knife." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the heater filled the silence. Rook lay nearby, ears twitching, eyes half closed, but alert. Finally, Dana said, "If they erased you, it wasn't to protect you. It was to protect them." Ethan looked at her, weary but resolved. "Then let's make sure they don't erase him next." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat on the cot in his small apartment above the garage, the room dimly lit by the street lamp outside. The old file played in his mind like a broken reel, bits of sound, sand whipping across metal, the flash of gunfire, the cry of a boy. He rubbed his temple, but the fragments only grew sharper. Suddenly, Rook, lying near the bed, lifted his head and made a low, soft sound, a whine that was almost human. Ethan looked down, and for a split second he saw it again, the same desert, the same smell of burnt air, Rook dragging his injured leg toward him through smoke. His breath caught. He reached down, hand trembling, and brushed the dog's fur. "You remember everything, don't you?" he murmured. "Even the things they buried." Rook rested his muzzle on Ethan's knee, amber eyes reflecting the glow of the lamp. And in that moment, Ethan understood something chilling and profound. The dog wasn't the one who needed rehabilitation. He was. 2 weeks had passed since the night Dana found the file marked Operation Winter Halo. Denver's skyline now lay beneath a sky of pale silver, the kind that promised snow but never delivered. The air had thawed enough for the city to remember it was alive. For Ethan Ward, though, the days felt like they belonged to someone else's life. A calm before a storm he could already smell in the air. He and Rook trained outdoors now, in the open lot behind the canine facility. The snow there had melted into patches of slush, the ground scarred with boot prints and paw tracks. Every morning, Ethan would arrive before sunrise, setting out cones and obstacles in silence, his breath forming clouds in the still air. Rook moved beside him, alert and responsive, no longer the condemned dog of winter, but something steadier, something returned. On the second Monday of February, the department invited a small press group to film rehabilitation progress for public transparency. It was supposed to be routine, but Ethan knew the moment he heard the word press that nothing was ever routine when cameras got involved. Dana, who had fought for the demonstration, tried to keep things controlled. "Just basic obedience drills," she told him that morning. "No commands in German, no mention of the military. Just show the progress." Ethan nodded. Simple. By noon, the yard was lined with cameras, a few journalists, and a crowd of onlookers gathered behind the chain-link fence. The winter wind carried the hum of the city. Car horns, distant sirens, murmured conversation. Rook stood by Ethan's side, tail low, calm. Everything was fine until a garbage truck across the street slammed its lid shut with a metallic clang. The sound tore through the air like gunfire. Rook jolted, muscles seizing, a sharp bark bursting from his chest. The leash snapped taut as he lunged forward, eyes wide, breath ragged. "Rook, easy!" Dana shouted, heart pounding. But Ethan didn't yell. He dropped to one knee, voice low, steady, the same voice that had once cut through the noise of war. "Horzu." The command slipped from his lips like instinct, not thought. And just like that, Rook froze. Then he sat, perfectly still. Silence followed. Cameras clicked. Someone gasped. Ethan stayed kneeling, hand on Rook's shoulder, whispering something no microphone caught. The shepherd's chest heaved once, then stilled. The crowd erupted. Whispers, applause, disbelief. Dana exhaled hard, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. Rosner, watching from the side, muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." That night, the clip hit the internet. The caption read, "Blind veteran calms dangerous military dog with a whisper." Within hours, it spread everywhere. By dawn, Ethan's face was on national news feeds, framed beside Rook's. Anchors called it a miracle of empathy. Others called it evidence of experimental training gone wrong. Dana's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. By the third day, even the Army's Public Relations Office had issued a statement. No record of Operation Winter Halo exists, which of course meant there was one. In Washington, D.C., a meeting convened in a glass-walled room overlooking the Potomac. Colonel Mason Holt, 58, still sharp in his pressed uniform, leaned against the conference table, jaw locked. His once black hair had faded to iron gray. His posture, ramrod straight, could still silence a room. A younger officer handed him a tablet. "Sir, this is the man from the video. Ethan Ward. He's listed as medically discharged, 2017. The dog matches an archived unit, K9, RZK-17. Holt's expression didn't move, but his eyes narrowed. "Rook." "Yes, sir." The officer hesitated. "Orders, Colonel?" Holt tapped the tablet once, considering. "Send it to Internal Affairs, quietly. If he's talking to that dog again, then something we buried isn't staying buried." Back in Denver, Ethan sat in the quiet of his small apartment. The TV was off, but he could still hear the echo of the newscast in his mind. Every interview, every opinion piece, they all spoke about him, but none to him. Dana knocked softly and stepped inside, her cheeks red from the cold. She carried 2 cups of coffee. "You're famous," she said, half smiling. "I didn't want to be," Ethan replied. She sat opposite him. "You handled it perfectly out there. That command, Horzu, the way he stopped, that wasn't just instinct." He looked up, his blind eye catching the lamplight. "It wasn't mine anymore. It was muscle memory, something he remembered before I did." Dana hesitated, then pulled out her tablet. "The clip's already been analyzed. There's speculation that Rook's part of a classified program. Words like neural conditioning, handler imprinting. Someone even mentioned memory transfer protocols." Ethan scoffed. "They'll make anything sound like science fiction to hide guilt." "Maybe," Dana said, "but that video woke someone up. I got an encrypted message this morning, unsigned. It said, 'Containment compromised. Winter Halo assets under review.'" Ethan's shoulders stiffened. "Who sent it?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but whoever it was, they knew the code name." Outside, snow began again, slow, deliberate flakes falling through the glow of the streetlights. Rook, lying near the door, lifted his head and stared at the window as if sensing movement in the distance. Ethan rose, walking toward him. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured, the past coming back. The dog's ears flicked. Dana watched them, unease curling in her gut. "Ethan, if this is what I think it is," he turned to her. "Then we don't run. Not yet. We find out who tried to erase us." 3 days later, a black SUV rolled through the gates of the K-9 facility under a gray morning sky. Captain Rosner stood by the entrance, arms folded, expression tight. When the door opened, 2 men in dark suits stepped out, followed by a third, Colonel Holt. His face had aged, but his presence hadn't softened. He walked with the deliberate calm of someone accustomed to command. "Captain," he said curtly, "we'll be reviewing files regarding your rehabilitation program. Where's Sergeant Ward?" Rosner's brow furrowed. "He's not a sergeant anymore, sir. Civilian volunteer." Holt gave a thin smile. "Once a soldier, always one." Inside the facility, Dana spotted them through the observation glass and froze. She'd never met Holt, but she didn't need an introduction. The weight of his presence said everything. Ethan, sensing her silence, asked quietly, "What's wrong?" "Your past just walked in," she whispered. That evening, Holt's convoy left the center. He'd reviewed, questioned, inspected. But the look in his eyes as he passed Rook's kennel lingered like a shadow, not of recognition, but calculation. Dana stood by the door as the SUV disappeared into the snow. "He's not done," she said. Ethan nodded. "No. He's just remembering, too." Rook gave a low growl that faded into the hum of the wind. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the storm that had waited 7 years was finally beginning to move. A week had passed since Colonel Holt's unannounced visit. Denver had sunk back into a deceptive calm, the kind that came before a blizzard or a scandal. At the K-9 rehabilitation facility, everything looked the same. Handlers moving through drills, officers writing reports, snow melting in slow gray puddles. But the silence between Ethan, Dana, and Rosner had grown heavy with unspoken tension. Ethan had noticed the subtle changes first. Extra patrols near the gate, new personnel in the security office, restricted access to the computer lab. "They're closing in," he told Dana quietly one night as they reviewed training notes. Whatever Holt came here for, it wasn't to observe. Dana agreed. Her instincts, honed from years of police work and too many sleepless nights, told her the same thing. They weren't being watched because of Rook's progress. They were being contained. She decided to dig deeper. That night, after the last shift clocked out, Dana slipped into the administrative office. Her auburn hair was tied back under a beanie, her breath shallow as she typed into the command terminal. Holt's team had left encrypted traces in the system. Remote audits, restricted folders, all tied to a classified federal network. She bypassed 2 layers of firewalls before reaching a folder labeled Archive Aleppo IP Pro TY Redacted. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The screen filled with broken data fragments, logs, transcripts, and field reports dated 7 years earlier. At the bottom of the file tree sat a recording marked RZ-17 Handler Audio. She plugged in her earpiece and hit play. Static, then a voice, male, calm, commanding. "Rook, Horzu, Bleeb." The dog's bark followed, sharp and obedient. The second voice on the tape was fainter, panicked, a child speaking Arabic. Gunfire in the distance. Then the first voice again, louder now, shouting over the chaos. "Cover him! Stay!" Dana froze. The voice belonged to Ethan Ward. Her pulse hammered. She replayed the fragment twice more, eyes wide. It was undeniable. He had been Rook's original handler. Years before the official record said he even entered the program. The file ended abruptly with a sound that wasn't static. It was an explosion. She found Ethan in the training bay the next morning, his breath fogging in the cold. Rook was by his side, sitting calmly as he brushed snow off the shepherd's fur. The faint light from the ceiling made Ethan's face look older, lined by sleeplessness. "I found proof," Dana said softly. He looked up, reading her tone. "Proof of what?" "That you trained him," she said, handing him the flash drive. This was recorded in Aleppo. "You gave commands in German. Same voice, same tone. The date matches Operation Winter Halo." Ethan stared at the drive, but didn't take it. Why would they erase it? Dana's eyes flicked to the scar just below his left ear. "Because you disobeyed orders. You stayed behind when they pulled out." He looked down at Rook, who was now watching them both, ears pricked. "We stayed because there was a child," Ethan murmured. "A boy trapped under rubble. Holt ordered a full withdrawal, said the area was compromised, but I couldn't leave." He pressed a hand against his temple, and for a moment the memory surfaced clear and cold. He saw the dust, the heat, Rook digging through debris with blood on his muzzle. He heard the child's weak cries, "Help me," and the radio static as command shouted, "Abort mission, protocol in effect." "I got the kid out," Ethan said, his voice low. "But when we reached the convoy, Holt was gone. He left us there." Dana felt her throat tighten. "And when they found you—" "They didn't want witnesses," he finished. "They called it a failed extraction. The boy didn't survive. Neither did my career." He rubbed the old tag that still hung from Rook's collar, the one marked RZK-17. "They erased the report, wiped my file, sedated me. Told me the mission had been classified due to civilian interference. I thought maybe I'd lost my mind. But he glanced at Rook. He never forgot." That afternoon, Dana drove to a coffee shop near Union Station to meet Lieutenant Gus Moreno, an old friend from her police academy days. Moreno was in his 60s, short and broad, with gray stubble and kind eyes that hid a lifetime of secrets. His uniform was retired, but his access wasn't. He listened quietly as she explained everything: the file, the audio, the missing logs. When she finished, he sipped his coffee and said, "You know what NI-PROT means, right?" She shook her head. "Non-intervention protocol," he said. "It's a clearance designation used when the government contracts private assets for missions they can't acknowledge. Dogs, handlers, medical units, all ghost operations. Once it's marked NI, it doesn't exist." "So they were working under private contract?" Dana asked. Moreno nodded. "Likely a joint between the Army and a private military firm. If Winter Halo went sideways, civilians dead, unauthorized rescues, they'd bury it fast." "And Holt?" she asked. Moreno's smile faded. "He ran point on it. If the file's resurfacing, he's got everything to lose." Dana stared at her cup, the coffee long gone cold. "Then he's not investigating Ethan," she said quietly. "He's hunting him." That night she returned to the facility and found Ethan sitting by Rook's kennel, the dog asleep at his feet. The lights were low, the hum of the heater steady. She told him everything. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, "They called it Winter Halo, but it wasn't about the cold. It was about silence. The kind that follows when good men do the right thing and the world pretends not to see." Rook stirred it, the sound of his voice lifting his head. Ethan ran a hand down his back, fingers brushing the thick fur. "I remember now," he said. "The last thing before the blast. Rook wouldn't move. He was shielding the boy. I gave the order to stay, even when I heard Holt screaming over comms. After that, nothing." He looked up at Dana. "He saved me, but they called it Sostari insubordination." "Then we show the world what really happened," Dana said. "The truth, unredacted." Ethan's lips curved into a tired half-smile. "You have no idea how dangerous that sentence is." "I do," she said, "but danger's not new to either of us. The next morning, the world seemed quieter. Too quiet. Snow had begun falling again, heavy and wet, blanketing the city in white. When Dana arrived at the facility, she found Rosner waiting at the door, his face pale. "Where's Ethan?" she asked. Rosner handed her a note, just a folded sheet of paper, edges damp. "They're coming for him. He's gone to make it right." Dana's stomach dropped. "Gone where?" Rosner shook his head. He didn't say, but Holt's men were here at dawn. Outside, the snow kept falling, erasing footprints before anyone could follow. Somewhere in the white distance, Ethan and Rook were already on the move, carrying not just a collar and a file, but a story the government had tried to bury in sand and silence. The storm hit Denver that night like a memory that refused to fade. Snow rolled down from the Rockies, burying streets and rooftops under a heavy white stillness. In the dim garage behind the K-9 facility, Ethan Ward moved with a quiet urgency that only soldiers understood. Every motion had purpose. Every sound meant risk. He loaded a duffel bag into the back of a dark green Ford pickup, a borrowed one, its license plates swapped, sought. The truck's engine had been preheated to avoid drawing attention. Rook sat in the passenger seat, ears twitching, tail still. The shepherds seemed to know they weren't going on a routine drive. "Fuel's full," Dana whispered, stepping out of the shadows beside the vehicle. Her breath misted in the freezing air. She wore a dark parka, jeans, and a wool cap pulled low. In her hand was a sealed envelope. "Copy of the files, 2 flash drives, and 1 offline backup. I wiped the system. Holt's team won't find a trace." Ethan nodded, checking the rearview mirror, though his right eye could barely see in the low light. "You sure you want to do this, Crowley? You've still got a career to lose." Dana gave a humorless smile. "It stopped being about careers the moment I heard your voice on that recording." They both froze as headlights swept briefly across the snow outside. For a long second, the only sound was the wind pressing against the door. Then the lights moved on. Ethan exhaled. "They're watching the main roads. We go north through the foothills. Estes Park. You know the back route?" She nodded. "Gravel path behind Thompson Canyon. It's not on GPS." Rook gave a low, throaty sound, as if urging them to move. Ethan reached over, rubbing the dog's head gently. "Easy, partner. We're not running away. We're going home." They drove through the night, snow swirling in the beams of the truck's headlights. The world outside looked hollowed out. Silent gas stations, dark houses, the occasional plow truck carving through white oblivion. Dana drove while Ethan navigated by instinct, mapping turns he shouldn't have remembered. "Why Estes Park?" she asked quietly. Ethan's gloved fingers traced the dashboard. "There's an old ranger cabin up near the ridge. My unit used it for cold weather drills. No power grid, no surveillance, just wind, wood, and solitude." She glanced at him. "And after that?" He didn't answer right away. Outside, the wind howled over the mountains. Finally, he said, "After that, we make sure the truth doesn't die in silence." By dawn, they reached the outskirts of Estes Park. The snow had slowed, but fog still hugged the pines. The cabin stood at the edge of a frozen lake, its roof bowed under frost, its chimney still intact. Inside, Ethan checked the perimeter, moving with the precise caution of a man who'd done this too many times before. Rook followed, nose sweeping through corners, tail steady. Dana lit the small wood stove and rubbed her hands near the fire, watching orange light flicker across the worn floorboards. "It's almost peaceful," she murmured. Ethan gave a dry laugh. "Peaceful's just another word for waiting." She studied him for a moment. The lines on his face seemed deeper now, not from age, but from remembering. "You've done this before, haven't you?" "Hide?" he said, sitting beside the fire. "Yeah, the last time it was in Syria. We just pulled that boy from the rubble. Rook was bleeding from shrapnel. I was half-blind, and Holt was screaming on the radio for us to withdraw. Dana's voice softened. And you didn't. Ethan shook his head, because that child was still breathing. He paused, staring into the flames. They called it disobedience. I called it decency. For a while, neither spoke. Outside, the snow began to fall again, light, feathery, the kind that muffles the world. That afternoon, Ethan set up his old military laptop on the cabin table. The machine was scratched, its casing patched with tape. He connected one of Dana's drives. The screen flickered, then filled with encrypted folders. At the top was one titled Winter Halo, Witness Archive. He opened a blank video log. "This is Ethan Ward," he said, voice low, deliberate. "Former U.S. Army, Tactical Search Division. 7 years ago, during Operation Winter Halo, my unit was ordered to withdraw from a civilian zone in Aleppo. We disobeyed to save a trapped child. The mission failed, not because of us, but because of the command that left us behind." Dana stood by the window, filming him with her phone as a backup. "Keep going," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Our dog, Rook, designated RZK-17, was listed as unstable. I was marked MIA, later declared unfit for service after a memory suppression procedure. This is proof of that erasure. If you're watching this, it means someone tried to bury the truth again. Don't let them." He hit send, uploading the file through a secure satellite link to a contact named Sarah Whitfield, a former war correspondent who had once owed him her life. Dana looked at him. "You trust her?" "She's the only one who still believes the war never really ended," he replied. That night, as the temperature dropped below zero, the cabin filled with the soft crackle of the fire. Ethan sat with Rook resting against his leg. The shepherd's breathing was steady, his eyes half closed. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something like peace. Fragile, but real. Dana sat across from him, scribbling notes. "If they track the upload, they'll find us within hours," she said. "I know," Ethan replied. "That's why I sent it from a rotating proxy. It'll bounce through 6 networks before it lands." She smiled faintly. "You really planned this out." He looked up at her. "Soldiers don't plan for peace. We plan for survival." A sudden knock shattered the calm. They both froze. Rook's ears snapped forward. A low growl vibrated through his chest. Ethan reached for his sidearm, motioning Dana toward the back wall. The knock came again, followed by a voice, deep, measured, and unmistakable. "Ward, open the door." Ethan's heart sank. Ken Voss. He had only heard the name once before, whispered in military debriefs, attached to covert retrieval units that specialized in silencing ghosts. Ethan opened the door halfway. The man outside stood tall, clean-shaven, his overcoat dusted with snow. Early 40s, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. There was no anger in them, only a kind of exhausted certainty. "Agent Voss," Ethan said coldly, "you took your time." Voss stepped forward just enough for the light to touch his face. "You shouldn't have gone public." Ethan gave a humorless smile. "Public's the only reason we're still breathing. I'm not here to kill you," Voss said, "but you have something classified. That file." Dana moved beside Ethan. "You mean the truth?" Voss sighed, looking past them into the cabin. "Truth doesn't matter when the people who write history control the ink." Rook growled, standing between them. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's collar. "You can erase files," he said quietly, "but not memory. Not his. Not mine." Voss's gaze softened for the first time. "You think I don't know what that's like?" he murmured. "I was there too, Ward, a mile south of your position. We were ordered to stand down. When we heard your distress call, Holt ordered comms blackout. I still hear that boy's scream at night." For a moment the three of them stood there, soldier, agent, and witness, all carrying the same ghosts. Finally, Voss lowered his voice. "You have until morning. After that, my orders change." He turned and walked into the snow, disappearing into the blizzard. Ethan closed the door slowly. Dana stared at him, stunned. "He's giving us time." "Then we use it," Ethan said. He looked down at Rook, whose eyes reflected the firelight. "We've been running from the dark long enough," he whispered. "Time to face it." Morning came slow and gray over Estes Park, the snow glittering faintly under the first light. Inside the old ranger cabin, the fire had burned low, leaving only embers and the smell of smoke. Ethan Ward sat by the window, his silhouette quiet against the pale dawn. Rook lay beside him, alert yet calm, eyes fixed on the door. They'd been awake all night. After Ken Voss's warning, neither Ethan nor Dana dared to sleep. The satellite upload had gone through, but the question that lingered like frost on glass was whether it had reached Sarah Whitfield in time. Dana checked her phone again. No signal. She sighed, pacing near the stove. "He said we had until morning. It's morning." Ethan rubbed Rook's neck absently. "Then we're out of borrowed time." Outside, the low growl of engines echoed through the valley. 3 SUVs crawled up the snowbound road, headlights off, black against the white. "They're here," Dana whispered. Ethan stood, pulling on his jacket. The same tan-brown Carhartt he'd worn the day he first met Rook, its fabric now stained, faded, weathered by more than snow. Then let's make it worth their drive. By the time the vehicles stopped outside, the cabin had fallen silent again. The door opened with a gust of cold air as Agent Voss stepped inside first. His face was drawn, eyes rimmed with fatigue, his gloved hand resting on the holster at his side. Behind him were 2 younger agents, rigid, watchful. Voss's gaze met Ethan's. "You should have run farther." "Running doesn't erase the truth," Ethan said. "You of all people should know that." Voss exhaled, stepping closer. "You uploaded it, didn't you?" Ethan didn't answer. Voss looked to Dana. "He's forcing my hand. You realize that?" Dana crossed her arms. "You already had your orders." He stared at her a long moment, then said quietly, "You don't understand what Holt is capable of. He's not just protecting a file. He's protecting an empire built on silence." The crunch of boots outside broke the tension. Colonel Holt entered the cabin, his uniform immaculate even in the snow, his gray hair slicked back like a steel blade. The air around him seemed to freeze further. "Sergeant Ward," Holt said, his tone clipped, almost polite. "You've caused quite the spectacle." Ethan stood his ground. "You left a child to die." The colonel's jaw tightened. "I left a compromised unit behind enemy lines. You disobeyed a direct order and endangered federal operations. The boy's death was unfortunate, but necessary." Dana's voice cut through the room. "You erased him. You erased both of them." Holt turned toward her, expression cold. "You don't bury ghosts, officer. You keep them from haunting the living." He nodded once toward Voss. "Retrieve the drives." But Voss didn't move. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The wind outside howled through the cracks in. The walls, carrying the faint sound of approaching helicopters. Or maybe it was just the storm. Then Voss said quietly, "It's too late." Holt frowned. "What?" Voss took a slow step forward. "You're already on camera." He nodded toward the window. Outside, across the ridge, 2 bright beams pierced through the fog. Drones, small but steady, hovering. "Your men didn't sweep the ridge. They're broadcasting everything live." Dana smiled faintly. Sarah Whitfield sends her regards. Holt turned toward the window, color draining from his face. "Shut it down," he barked to his men, but the world had already seen enough. Ethan stepped forward, voice calm. "The truth's out, Colonel. The footage, the recordings, the child's name. You can't bury this one." Holt's hand twitched near his holster, but he hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty cracked his composure. Voss lowered his weapon and said softly, "Let it go, sir." Outside, the sound of rotor blades grew louder, National Guard helicopters cresting the ridge, the insignia bright against the white dawn. The scene was no longer a covert retrieval. It was a rescue. Holt looked around. At the agents who now lowered their weapons, at Voss who no longer saluted, and finally at Ethan, whose steady gaze cut deeper than any accusation. "You think you've won," Holt said bitterly, "but the world forgets. It always does." Ethan shook his head. "Not this time." He reached down and rested his hand on Rook's back. Some memories survive everything. 2 months later, spring returned to Denver like forgiveness. Slow, hesitant, but real. The snow melted from the rooftops, and sunlight spilled across the city streets for the first time in weeks. On the outskirts of town, a modest facility opened behind a restored brick gate. The sign read, "The Hollow Path Canine Recovery and Reintegration Center." Inside, the air smelled of cedar and wet grass. Former military dogs played in the training yard, watched over by volunteers and veterans alike. Ethan walked along the fence line, a slight limp in his step, but a new steadiness in his voice. His flannel sleeves were rolled up, his jacket tied around his waist. Rook trotted beside him, healthy again, a gold tag gleaming on his collar. RZK-17. Retired combat veteran. Dana called from the porch, smiling. "You're early again." "Old habits," Ethan said, smiling faintly. "Soldiers show up before the sun." They sat together on the porch steps as the wind stirred the trees. Rook settled between them, tail sweeping gently against the wood. "Sarah's piece aired last week," Dana said. "Full broadcast. The Pentagon released a statement this morning, official reinstatement of your honors." Ethan chuckled softly. "Didn't think I had any honors left to reinstate." She looked at him. "You do now." For a long while they watched the yard in silence. A young shepherd named Tango following Rook clumsily through an obstacle course, learning how to trust again. Ethan leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You know, back in Aleppo, I told him one word before the blast." Dana turned to him. "What was it?" He smiled faintly. "Home." Rook looked up at the sound, ears perked, tail wagging once as if he remembered. The sun dipped low, spilling gold across the yard, and the world felt quiet in a way that didn't hurt anymore. Sometimes redemption didn't roar. It whispered, through the soft thud of paws, through the hum of wind against old wood, through the steady heartbeat of something once broken that had finally found its way back to life. Ethan reached down, hand resting on Rook's fur. "We made it," he said softly. "We really did." Rook pressed his head against Ethan's knee, eyes closing as the light faded. And for the first time since that day in the desert, the man and the dog were home again. Sometimes God's miracles don't arrive with thunder or wings. They walk on 4 paws and carry the memory of love through the dark. Ethan thought he had lost everything, his sight, his purpose, his brother in arms. But when Rook looked at him again, it wasn't just recognition, it was grace. A reminder that faith can survive the noise of war, and that redemption sometimes wears a collar. If you've ever felt forgotten, remember this: even when the world turns cold, heaven still remembers your name. Some bonds are written not in ink, but in light, the kind only God can keep from fading. So tonight, take a moment to thank Him for every second chance, every loyal heart, every quiet miracle that finds its way back home. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that love still wins. Leave a comment below, tell us where you're watching from, and drop an amen if you believe that no soul, human or animal, is ever beyond saving. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, redemption, and the extraordinary grace that lives in ordinary lives. May God bless you, and may He keep your heart warm through every winter you face.